I'm Yashwendra Singh, Executive Editor of ETCIO, and also the moderator for this very topical panel discussion on leveraging the SASE environment for maximizing security. The current changes to our work lead to an increased need for robust networking and network security solution. With physical office boundaries slowly fading away, it is now more important than ever to have secure access to critical applications from any part of the world. Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE, converges networking and network security into a single cloud-delivered offering to provide guaranteed secure access to your applications, whether they are hosted privately or in the cloud. In this session today, industry experts will deliberate on various aspects of SASE and its benefits for business. Joining me in this session are top enterprise technology experts. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Debashish Singh, CIO Emphasis, Mr. Anil Porter, EVP IT and GDS Services and CIO Interglobe Technology Quotient, Mr. Harshad Mengle, Group CISO Future Group, Mr. Navneethan M, CISO from a leading payment gateway company, Mr. Vamsi Ponakanti, Head of Technical Sales India and SARC for McAfee, and last but not the least, Mr. Anuj Gupta, Chief Executive Officer, Hitachi Systems Microclinic. Welcome, gentlemen. I'll set the ball rolling with Mr. Debashish. Sir, how has the COVID-19 crisis impacted your enterprise? See, several companies across the world halted new projects. Given that you're a mid-tier IT ITS company, how did that impact your business? And how do you see that impacting business and technology going forward?
Well, the COVID-19, the pandemic, I will definitely say it has changed the paradigm of delivering services to our customers, and even at the same time, the so-called business continuity framework that used to have from so long, right? So while all these changes has happened, because traditionally what we do in a typical BCP scenario, we try to bring people in a secured environment, deliver services out of it. But in a pandemic situation, currently what is happening, we are pushing people to their home. We are creating probably a borderless environment to deliver services. And being in IT services, and that too focusing primarily on BFSI customers across the globe, the challenges are definitely much higher, more from compliance and data security standpoint. So while we started this, of course, I will say this is something which everybody was taken on the back for, because while everybody had a so-called business continuity plan, but it was probably not covering each and every aspect of a situation like this at this scale, right? So I believe the initial reaction was definitely a little bit of chaos for a few days, but we could put our thoughts together pretty quickly and work with our customers to kind of bring the solution which will help the business to deliver the way it was supposed to. But at the same time, ensure that it's required security level, the compliance level, and the data integrity is not compromised. So the multiple angles were discussed, multiple solutions are put forward, and I can say that close to 90% plus of our customers, our delivery people, were working from home without any problem as we speak. So that was the situation at emphasis.
Sure. Anil, sir, you coming to you, sir, you'll be, surprised to know that there was a research done by a company of about, they covered 1,200 business leaders in that research, and it said that 74% of business leaders said the crisis exposed more gaps in their business operations and systems than they originally expected. So, what do you have to say about this, sir? Most of the technology leaders, business leaders were caught unawares, right? How do you see this and the impact of this on your organization?
So, first of all, in terms of the survey and its sample size, and the organization which was surveyed, we didn't get impacted at all in terms of cracks or anything. It was quite seamless, and we did something phenomenal after listening to or getting ready for this. It's a consistent investment over a period of time that it was seamless. Uh, I think the answer to that survey in terms of cracks coming out really was in terms of what thoughtful investment into various stacks needs to be. So people do have on-prem or cloud operations. They've invested into cloud or on-prem, into security based on their threat assessments, into various component layer, or I won't call it component, but at layers level, whether it is endpoint, perimeter, uh, network, all those stuff. Now, when unprecedented call that everything is locked down, I don't think so ever India has experienced this. Maybe few regions or few cities would have experienced in terms of curfew getting clamped. So obviously during curfew they're on leave, but this was something which was not imagined or thought before. So I think what Debashish was also saying, that organization did kind of quickly or rapidly rather adopted to it. And those initial quinks that would have come out, which was primarily around how to establish VPN setups, VPN licensing, or the mobility requirements that all of a sudden came out on the face of CIOs and organizations, where there was some good amount of cash outflow from these organizations. So that is more in terms of the angst or anxiety, which kind of
Sure.
organizations relay. But yeah, people who would have invested wisely, keeping in mind all scenarios, how good they capitalize on their investments, because IT professionals like us, typically whenever they do purchase, they look at about 2 to 3 years cycle, how to kind of sustain it. So if you kind of follow a thumb rule of how spends and how sizing needs to be, and be mindful of all the areas, over a period of time, you kind of wait it out. And we at ITQ, at Interglobe, have been investing into mobility, not today, but for many years. We have a consistent refresh policy for end using computing devices,
Sure,
as well as data center equipment, and we kind of follow that. The only exception was this year, that because we knew, and being in travel, which is hard to first or the first hit in the front line, and obviously will take time to recover. So we kind of relax those refresh policies, but in terms of
sure,
pretty future oriented. And for us, it was almost a week before lockdown call. We were seamless. Everybody was working, even to the extent our DevOps, our software, the entire lot was working from home seamlessly. Uh, Dominantly Microsoft shops, so working on Team Foundation, uh, doing the development, doing build. Obviously, when they do to build, upload on data cards or last mile, local last mile, do have a challenge. You can't compare that with your office LAN environment. Those were the queens, only queens. And these were kind of understood. And with the increase in plans and providing last mile other host networks in terms of DSL or high speed DSL, that kind of fits that also. So for today also, while we work, it's not necessary for people to come to office. If they feel they can work from home, they can work. There's a compulsion. If somebody wants to break the monotony of coming back to office, it's most welcome. So that's how we kind of work throughout. But I think businesses, apart from the initial IT challenges or hiccups, the rather biggest challenges, how do they kind of get their top line, how they sustain those top lines so that business continuity is there. Because business continuity is not keeping lights on. Business continuity is ensuring that your top line keeps on running. That's
sure.
most important.
Right, sir.
Yeah.
Right, sir. No, that's great to hear that you got back on your feet quite fast. Moving on to Mr. Harshad, sir, your company's tagline is shaping India's consumption journey. Do you see that consumption journey getting disrupted through COVID?
To extend, on behalf of business, I would say the footfall definitely has impacted. But in a totality, if you look at the essential services, they were all pretty much. We did very good in terms of delivering essential services. And in terms of coming back to the IT, because I think business is more for
Sure.
business folk to speak about. From an IT standpoint, we were actually we were already we were testing these kind of solutions which actually allow employees to work from home, and I would say without much of a challenges, we could migrate ourselves on the remote infrastructure. I mean, remote work from home kind of environment. Certain few challenges which we faced, but altogether, looking at the technology spec and the numbers which we have, nearly 15,000 to 20,000 users, they were seamlessly connected. They were accessing more than probably it was more working hours as we discussed earlier. So the challenges of performance which we faced initially, but over a period of time, since it's more of a agile way of working, we adopted quickly and enhanced our infrastructure as well. So yeah, in a way, this was more of a learning for us as well.
Sure, sir. Moving on to Mr. Navneethan, sir, was it a learning experience for you as well?
Absolutely, Yash. It's more or less in line with the thought about the business, and then Anil and Harshit that mentioned. It's like a well said, right? It's a two perspective where I can see. One is from the CIO standpoint, and then one is from the CISO standpoint. Earlier also, where we used to project in terms of the risk factor of the organizations towards the board members and all the things at all. It's on the paper. It's like there is a gap on the ground reality, as well as it's not so easy to demonstrate what is the real the fact and then cost benefit analysis and all the way, right? But now it's on the ground. It has been demonstrated from end to end. What is the major challenges we are going through that? What is there in the paper? It's beyond that. Whatever we have projected during our board meeting, it is maybe close to 20%, 30% of resources where we want to work from remote, or where we want to go through multiple use cases of the crisis and all the things. Now it's absolutely different. It's like 100% of the crisis, like the entire workforces needs to be connected from the the remote standpoint. That's what it is a bigger challenges, where it has been taken from the CIO standpoint as well as a CISO standpoint from end to end. Again, just I'm bifurcating. It's a two-way, right? One is just managing the show. It's a one way, right? As Harshad has mentioned, like how seamlessly people can connect from end to end with all the applications with the full workload. The way that we work in the office, it's not like just only the office setup, right? Where we have a dependency on the many factors, like in terms of your home network, your home environment, and then your pipeline, and then your internet provider, how many people have connected. It has n number of dependency across from point to point, where you have connected from home to the the office. So that's why the CIO and then CISOs put a lot of the effort on the ground to streamline in terms of seamless connectivity from home to office and provide a service to them.
Sure, sir. Sure.
A lot of threat landscapes, of course, we'll talk in detail and take it forward.
Of course. Let me come to you now. Anuj, you've heard all the top leaders talking about, how they encountered the situation and how they countered. Although nobody was prepared for it, they still bounced back. What has been your experience? I mean, you must have interacted with lots of CIOs, right, of late. So how was the situation?
Yeah, so I would echo with everything what Anil, Debussy, Shashad, and Amit said. That we've come to a similar kind of a situation. So we, being a system integrator, we've actually helped a lot of these organizations and facilitate this entire work from home journey. So if you really look back, it was March when suddenly we came to a lockdown, and most organizations had planned either a BCP 1, which is working 20, 25, 30% of the workforce from home. And boom, came a situation where we needed 100% of the workforce to work from home. Now, A, making them work from home, B, giving them a seamless experience, right? And again, as they always said that in India, we cannot work from home. It's only the thing for the West, right? In the last 3 months, it has taught us that yes, we in India can also work from home. So it's been an interesting journey. It all started with first getting just the laptops and, the network setting up at home. So today we are actually looking at how productivity can come in, how resourcefulness can come in. And today we are actually talking about that, yes, 20, 30, 40% of the workforce can work from home. We don't need those fancy offices. We have negotiation and emphasis. They believe in having these huge, big facilities, having everything that entices people to come to office and work from office, right? With all the, the cafeterias and all of that. And suddenly we think that, no, it's actually not needed. We can still work and function from home. So it's been a very interesting journey. I would say in the last 3 months, a lot of technology, which we thought were the hot technologies for customer, actually were out of the book. If you look at a very simple analysis, if you look at a Gartner report, which was published in Feb, and the top 10 technology trends that they were predicting and the investments in that technology trend. And now you look at the May report, 4 of them or 5 of them are not even featuring in the top 10. Right? So it's been a U-turn when I say from a technology standpoint. It's been a U-turn for a system integrator like us because tough times, different measures, different companies have different compliances, a different way of doing business from home. And I would say that as all of us in India, we've done a great job. We've got 80-90% of our workforce working from home. A lot of effectiveness is coming out. And today, as we stand, I think we are at a point, at least from a technology standpoint, that there is nothing missing from working from home or working from office. Right? So that's been my experience over the last 3 to 4 months.
Great inputs, Anuj. Moving on to you, Vamsi. Do you echo Anuj's sentiment there?
Yeah, echo and more. Couldn't agree more with everybody on the panel here. Yes. So here's the perspective, right? I mean, we've seen the world move from a scenario where everything was being done from office, or predominantly being done from office, to a world where predominantly everything needs to be done from home. And the infrastructure, the strategy, the planning was geared up towards a traditional working environment, working from home, towards a strategy that now needs to evolve and cater to more and more people working from home, more and more customers being serviced from home. And the true representation of that is the kind of conversations that we see on the panel, but conversations that we're having with customers. When this all started towards the end of March, I was speaking to a certain customer who was based in Chennai, and then it comes to light that they were only prepared at any point in time for only 20% of their workforce to actually work from home. And the rest of them had primarily been given a desktop, although they were an ITES company, for example, which meant that either you're staring at a loss of business, or you have to immediately ramp up from your laptop capacity, bring in a huge procurement cycle, and then start shipping out these laptops. Get them imaged, get the right set of software on that, get the right sort of provisioning on that, and then make them productive from where they are. So the challenges, while they appear and all of that, from what we're hearing from everyone, seem to be one or two statements that people are speaking about from a problem perspective. All of these esteemed people who are on this panel, when they were actually solving this, the number of steps involved in terms of solving those problems was much, much larger. And that's the kind of a change that we're now seeing. And so I completely agree. And the world will move towards a completely different strategy going forward. And that's my firm belief.
Sure. Right. So now let me touch upon a very touchy subject, that of budgets. CIOs have always been talking about, doing more with less. I guess this is the time to walk the talk, right? During my conversations with CIOs, they used to always lament about the fact that, 80% of the budget used to go into maintenance and only 20% of the budget they used to have for innovation. I feel even that 20% of the budget is now really hard to come by. So in such a situation, how do you think, CIOs should do more with less? Because obviously the top management would look at CIO to leverage technology for business growth. Anil sir, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, a very, very touchy and a very sensitive subject that you are kind of steering. I used to say that every time we needed something, so I used to take my begging ball or beg for something, get it going. Now that ball has also been taken away. So with the current, and that's what I said in the first answer session. Issue is not about how do you keep the lights and things working so that people can work. Issue confronting organization is how do you get the top line moving? How do you ensure that the top line comes? Because without top line, there is nothing that's going to happen. And most of the organization have kind of seen 2, 3, 4 months of absolute zero. We've seen zero because being in travel now, which is just less than a month now of operations. Aircraft have started flying. There's some trickle of business that is happening. Confidence level is low. It's pure, very, very essential travel that is happening. So top line will continue to be under severe pressure. Now, under those, it's highly or maybe next to impossible to get budgets for either innovation, and that too even a very limited for maintenance till the time it's not going to break, fall apart. The CA community, the chartered accountant community, is not going to give you any penny, and it's going to be very tough. How we go forward, at least for the next 6 to 8 months time, that how do you expectation business is expecting that you can do without any money. So that's, I think, a bigger challenge that we will start unfolding because people start working from home, good, certain organization will save out on real estate, maybe today, tomorrow, wherever, how do they do it? Because it's not also easy saving on real estate because you've got long-term contracting. How do you make the infrastructure lean? Uh, this will be one of the highest challenge for all CIOs, that without money, how do you keep it going around and still live up to the challenges of security, uh, whether it is this SASE framework or any other framework that you may call up. Uh, how do you keep it going? How do you, and then on top of the icing, on top of it is the geopolitical situation that changes so rapidly that it can have a very devastating or unimaginable consequences. Say, for example, the current border conflict that is there with one of our neighbors.
Right.
How it will pan out, whether it will flare up, not flare up, economically, what will the impacts, while there are rhetoric that are happening in terms of equipments and having trade barriers, but do we really have
Sure.
options that for certain things can we do this or not? So there are multiple challenges. So that how do CIOs just not only keep the lights on and ensure that people are able to seamlessly access,
Sure.
how do you aid the top line growth? Because
Right.
with that aid, maybe something could trickle down back to you in terms of supporting your requirements. So it's going to be very, very tough. This financial year is tough for everyone. There are
Sure.
no budgets. We've
Sure,
gone to
sir.
zero budgeting, and so would others organizations would also be following zero budgeting principle.
Right, right. No, it is said that the global economy is predicted to be hit to the tune of $1 trillion, according to the World Economic Forum. So, sir, if it is going to be tough for Anil, sir, I'm sure it will be tougher for Harshad because security has traditionally been looked upon as insurance. Your thoughts on this, Harshad, sir?
Yeah, so yeah, as I rightly mentioned, see today, if you look at the priority, business is the utmost priority. Then comes the maybe digital transformation and securing that digital transformation, how the data is getting exchanged. So of course, business is the most important. If we do, because recovery will be, businesses will be under tremendous pressure for recovery, and during this process, at the same time, they have to probably bring new technologies. The way today we work, maybe omni-channel, multi-channel things will open up, and then of course the digital moment or transformation will happen. Now, during this, I think whenever there is a digital transformation, security will always be considered. Of course, the way things will move ahead, I think there will be a lot of if and buts. Probably there are multiple things we need to look into. One is basically what kind of budget you have and what kind of a technologies today are there in the market. Now, out of that, which is a prevalent technology, whether we should go for a technology which is low cost, or which is basically more more important or more easy for me, or more user friendly or agile for me. So there are multiple aspects of looking into things. My hunch is basically startup will get a lot of opportunities here. Companies will take up some good startup technologies to learn how they function, what are the benefits of those startup technologies. And I think there is a good opportunity for CISOs as well to converge here. Now, the conversion in terms of whatever technologies today we have, whether are they sufficient, or we should move towards a newer technology, looking into the work from home aspect of it. So I think the whole gamut of looking cost versus the return on investment will definitely will change. And I think security also will be, to extent, will be impacted. But I think there is a good side, the positive side of startup coming up with good new products, which will be helpful for security industry.
Sure, sure. Debashish sir, top management wants to accelerate digital transformation while there are no budgets. How does the CIO balance the two?
Well, I believe the problem has not really changed over the period. There was always a budget pressure for the CIOs, and that has possibly become little acute in the current state because of the top line challenges. But as long as we align the investment with the top line, putting the right priorities in the front, I believe investments still continue. Because end of the day, if you look at in the current situation, what comes is possibly in a extended work from home scenario, compliance becomes the critical component. Because initial 1 month or 60 days, couple of months, customer would have probably given you a relaxed SLA or kind of stuff. But as things continues, definitely it is a requirement that you need to probably go back to your original SLAs and deliverables. And if you do that, compliance comes definitely as a priority there. So you have to how to ensure that whatever the level of compliance you had within the defined perimeter, are you probably maintaining the same in a extended work from home scenario? So those are the kind of areas we need to focus. And while you do it, what is the typical turnaround time in terms of investment to encashing that result of that investment, right? So you have to choose the right solutions which will give you, if not instant, but a result much quicker. So because speed is the essence here. We were talking about possibly weeks and days, not months and quarters. So choose the right solution, bring the solution which is going to probably get aligned and give you the boost in the top line and the revenue side of it, and implement it within a very, very short time span. And that is what will definitely going to help you in a long run. So that's the belief we carry.
Sure. Anuj, like Debashish said, bring in the right solutions. For instance, conferencing, collaboration solutions that can cut down on travel time could be an example. What else comes to your mind when we say, bringing in the right solutions, aligning it with business?
So, again, very interesting times, right? Budgets being cut, and, all the customers who are here on the forum, everyone's talking about lesser to spend, and, we depend on their budgets to actually come back with solutions or give technology. But, what I had said earlier, and I'll repeat that, in the last 3 months, we've seen a complete U-turn in terms of a lot of technology investments in organizations. So a lot of projects that we discussed probably 4-5 months back, which were coming to closure in April and June, have actually been shelved completely because it is not required anymore in the new work from home or the new normal. Now the technology initiative certainly leans on cloud because it is available, it's agile, and it can give you that, burst up and down, right? Second thing, what we've seen is, as compliance, as you go on work from home and as you go in a hybrid environment, compliance and security have really taken the first step. And in the last 3 months, we've had enough and more hacks, enough and more issues. And it's no longer about just a hack, but it's actually now fraud that is happening, cyber fraud, and actual money is getting transacted, right? So we've seen a thrust on security investments. Now, again, these are not traditional security investments that we're talking about. We're talking about if there are people who are logging in remotely, how do we secure it? Third thing that we've seen, and where a lot of emphasis and a lot of money is being spent by customers, is to give that user the same feel that he used to get in office with that same feel at home. Now he's remote. He doesn't have a help desk for help. He wants ease of use. And for productivity, you give the consumer or the user the same interface. So a lot of money, a lot of investments have actually gone in on technology which help you seamlessly migrate the user from working from office to working from home. And fifth, but which I've seen a complete surge in, is a lot around passwordless protection, right? Because once people start working from home, 70% of calls have actually come in that people keep forgetting passwords. A lot about passwordless protection, and a lot about the digital identity of the user. Because now that he's remote, now that he's working from a remote place, you have to really ensure that it's the right person. So identity access, and identity access security has become an extremely important element. And this is not going to go away because this work from home is going to continue for a while, and we'll see a lot of identity hacks which will happen in the next, in the times to come. So having the right identity has also become a big issue. So cloud, about identity, about security, seamless integration, and giving that user the feel that he was getting in office is the same feel at home. Like, this is where we've seen a lot of trust. And of course, burnout on Zooms and Teams and Googles, right? So I think after this, we'll probably need a week of a Zoom burnout holiday.
Sure. Vamsi, sir?
Yes.
Like Anuj just said, security will be there, cloud will be important. Your thoughts here, sir?
Agree with everyone's thoughts again, right? I mean, it's a common problem statement, it's a common solution, but there's some really interesting things that are brought out. We heard Anil say that you got to focus on the top line, the things that matter the most. We've heard Harshad, who's essentially speaking about an opportunity for startups, and so it's the mindset change that organizations will go through. They become a lot more agile, they become a lot more nimble. Most importantly, something that they brought out, it's not about SLAs that were traditionally applicable anymore. You have to look about how these SLAs will start applying, how the compliance remains intact, right? It's no longer about giving a break. Your client may give you a break, your employees may give you a break, but the bad actor is never going to give you a break. It's an opportunity for everything. He'll attack when you're the most vulnerable, and this is the most vulnerable situation at this particular point in time. And in terms of investments, in terms of how the world itself is changing from an investment perspective, yes, you've got to do a lot more with a lot less in terms of dollars or money that's available, but it's also going to change. So it's also going to speed up the process of prioritization. What's the number one spend that I have to take up? And by making this particular spend, this is going to help me be a lot more productive, be a lot more compliant, and be a lot more innovative. And that's the thing that's going to change. Bear with me while I give a slightly longish answer. In a traditional environment, you were looking at adding, whether it's an IT compute or security, in an incremental manner, because you have to derive the result on investments that is already made. But while people were being prepared for disruptions that are going to come, we are now 3 months into the disruption, which is just so rapid and it's just so strong and forceful that we suddenly have to not just make incremental changes, but you have to completely make a revolutionary approach to taking any of these approaches, whether it is IT or security. So the investments, like you said, I mean, an interesting topic that Anuj brought out is, if you look at the two reports from 3 months ago from Gartner and today, what were top 5 spends probably have taken a completely beaten out of that list. And new spends are going to come in, and security, we're seeing that, we've got a big spectrum of security offerings from device, traditional endpoint security, modules and so on, to where we see the customer spending right now. It's a lot more about transparent, seamless, borderless, frictionless security that is on the cloud. And that's where the edge security is becoming that much more important. The SASE framework that you spoke about is becoming that much more important because it's simultaneous services, whether it is for firewalls, whether it is web security, whether it is for cloud security in a development world or in a fulfillment world. All of this while looking at the device and you're maintaining the posture integrity of that device. To Anuj's point, the identity, you have to continuously establish identity. You have to continuously establish compliance of that device. So it's a combination of all of this, and that's where we see a big uptick towards these SASE and zero trust frameworks, and it's only going to be that. So smarter investments. So I would not say do more with less. It's going to be do a lot more with smarter investments. I think that's the way it's going to evolve.
Sure, sir. So talking about SASE, I'll bring in Mr. Navneethan here. Sir, digital transformation definitely improves agility and competitiveness, right? However, it also increases the threat surface for any enterprise. So how do you see SASE fitting in here? Navneethan, sir.
Amazing. Just before getting to SASE, just a little bit abstract on, the key thought, like how we are going to enforce, right? From CISO standpoint, just where I can project is two ways. One is where you can focus, how do we prioritize, right? As Vamshi had mentioned, like how do you make a prioritize of which is essential, which is critical, how we are going to, make an impact for this organization. So then this, budding it will, approve. Second, foremost point is where I'll see is how we can make effective enforcements on the existing setup, whatever we have. It's maybe the endpoint, it may be the small access control, or it may be identity access management, or maybe the complete, the cloud security. So from that standpoint, I'll see on the existing control, on the existing projects, how ensure that the better results out of that, because otherwise sometime it will be always a new toy, right? It will be keep coming, the keep buying. It may not help, but ultimately how we are going to manage the things effectively also, it's the major play. So maybe if we come to the SASE standpoint, it's a two-way, right? The SASE, if you of the attack which has happened, it's maybe the bigger guys, right? It's maybe the Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn. Most of the things it's happened due to the integrations or maybe the API security. So it's it's an overhead for the most of the organizations, right? If you add multiple vendors, multiple merchants, and then multiple the network component or network security component, it increase the overhead of overall the end-to-end the environment. So that's why SASE plays the major role, because it helps a lot in terms of to build this entire network in very optimized way. It's not only that, it's very agile, right? It's like from end to end, how we can enforce in terms of speedy way. And then second one is, as rightly Vamsi had mentioned, we have onboarded. Earlier we had only 20% of workforce needs to be onboarded. Now we have onboarded 100%. The network performance completely it's gone. It's more of the DDoS attack kind of stuff, right? Instead of 10 people, it's like 1,000 people logged in. So really we're not sure how this network sustain, and then how it can cascade the connectivity between the applications as well as the respective servers. So that way network performance also play the the major and very vulnerable way. That SASE play a very significant role, but from real ground standpoint, it takes some more time to. If you take a 10 years back, cloud, right? Cloud is most still reserve it, right? All the assets to the cloud environment, but still they feel there are security component which needs to be taken care. But similarly, SASE also will helps a lot to have integrated model to sustain as well as to ensure the performance, to reduce the overhead. But at the same time, it take some more time to arrive and then to adapt and then optimize across the environment.
Sure. Debashish sir, do you also feel the same? While this is the need of the hour, but like Navneethan sir says, it could take some time for CIOs to adopt this new environment.
I do feel so. Yes, it's going to take time, but this is one of the priority in the current context, and we are talking about the priority. Vamsi just touched upon that. If we look at what is changing, probably the more users are outside the enterprise network now. They're not sitting in the office; they're outside. The applications that you're accessing are more from the cloud than from the data center internally within the perimeter. And similarly, the number of devices getting access today, yes, there are definitely a change in that, whether it is a company provided asset or a third party BYOD asset or a customer provided asset, right? As the things are changing, your traditional approach also need to change while dealing with the security. And the SASE framework or the GTNA framework definitely helps in terms of managing this kind of changed environment. So for every enterprises who works in this kind of environment, it is a must to look at it at the moment. So I do feel pretty soon it will become a most critical point to for every CIOs and CISOs to kind of put some budget around it to ensure that their data and the security layer is definitely taken care. Because if you do not take care of at the end user level, at the access layer, you cannot really kind of protect the information at the network layer anymore.
Sure, sir. Anil sir, I just heard a CIO saying a very interesting thought. He said your data has left your data center and your users have left your network. So in such a scenario, how do you see SASE as an architecture, combining or converging both security as well as network? How relevant would it be going forward?
So as other fellow panelists said, it makes need because the law has not changed. So whenever I have security, information security discussion, I purely look at from what the law stipulates, what are the threat vectors. So while people have left your network and data has left four walls and sitting somewhere else, but they're still connected. There is a kind of a transition phase that we are in. SASE as a framework is good. It kind of echoes with the current state of operation that we all are in. Uh, so my view on any new framework or any framework where it warrants a change. Now, what kind of change are we talking about? Is it, if you look at the OSI layer model, where is it changing? How is it changing? Again, does it has what kind of monetary impact it has? So we need to be kind of pragmatic in how we look at it. It is promising, no doubts about it. But be pragmatic in terms of, has the law changed? No. Which was 3 months back, and controls that were 3 months back are still there. Maybe few controls may get added up. Is your threat vector changed? How much has that changed? Uh, so those assessments, and then so if it is about framework controls, audits, and ensuring that even the current stack that you have can live up to that framework, good, go for it. If it warrants fresh investment, go through this laundry list of law, compliances, and control, where it kind of, and what is at stake. So, if we really look at, there are fundamentally three types of threats that originate. One, obviously, people looking for gold. Do you have the gold? And obviously, if you have gold, they will start smell it and reach out to you, whichever means. Second is people doing for fame, whether it could be ethical or non-ethical. And third are state sponsored. State sponsored is something, it doesn't impact all, it impacts certain vital installations. Vital installation in the public space, which is government controlled, or even private space. So, what is your threat vector? So, purely if you go by that assessment, you will be balancing it out and doing, I would say, more value add to the business rather than clogging and adding more cost to it. So it's good to have all of these. It's a journey that everybody will have to take. So first check is, obviously you need to be compliant to the law. What the law says. Law doesn't tell you framework. It only tells you guidelines and the penal actions.
Sure.
So if there is something which is having a penal action, and say 500 rupees fine, hypothetically speaking, there is nothing as 500 rupees, but X whatever. So how CAs will look at it? Rather than investing 5 CR or 50 lakhs or whatever it could be,
Right.
and move ahead and at least warrant that situation, because cash flows are strained. Whenever they get improved, then you would have leverages. But to answer and have a correct answer to the question, Vishwendra, good adoption has to be looked in from all these parameters: law, control, compliances, vector,
Sure.
and then move to conversion.
Sure. Harshad, would something like SASE make sense for your enterprise?
Yeah, I think SASE, I'll probably put a different context to this. So during in the last 2-3 months during this COVID situation, what we have seen is basically a lot of users are working from home. Essentially, the same users are sharing bandwidth with multiple other things like their schooling. Kids are in schooling, so that bandwidth is being shared with school. Looking into the school videos, audios, even cookery shows. Some of the family, they are actually using this bandwidth, which is basically catering for home, is basically now getting used for corporates and home. Now, looking at the security today, the bandwidth is very essential when you connect to your remote infrastructure. And if it is not sufficient, challenge will be much because then you will probably not be able to operate. Now, that's the first part. Second is latency. If you look at the whole architecture, when you allow people to work from home through VPN or any medium, you always important thing is the latency. What is the latency, quality of service, how you are ensuring that the data is protected and not leaked out, especially when you are now even the government app is allowing you to open up a Bluetooth. Is it really going to, if you are allowing your mobile BYOD, and if you have those apps on those mobile devices. This Bluetooth, allowing opening this Bluetooth will put your data, corporate data or enterprise data in at risk. So there are certainly multiple things to look into. Going back to the branches which we have today, stores, SD-WAN is very much essential. And today the technology is changing so fast that software-defined network is the need of hour. So what my feeling is basically at this present scenario, I think SASE definitely makes more sense. And then I think whole IT has to take a leap jump to look into the the advantages of SASE, because cloud adoption in India is not much, but now it is going going to we can see a big change there. So I think looking at this all aspect, SASE is going to be the next future. This is what my feeling is.
Sure, sure. So we'll talk about the advantages of SASE in a bit, but let's go to Vamsi first. Vamsi, what are the requirements from an infrastructure standpoint to be SASE enabled? I mean, budgets are hard to come by. Does SASE architecture need a humongous infrastructure, or is it infra light?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So from a SASE perspective, I'll just take a step back. Understanding the need for SASE, we all understand that. From an infra and architecture perspective, I think they go both hand in hand. Architecture defines your investments from an infra perspective. There's a couple of really good points that were brought out, especially by Harshad or SD-WAN. That's going to be like a key component of it, right? So in terms of how the strategy is and what SASE helps you solve, is there's two aspects. One is the security. So you bring security closer to the applications. So in this case, as the applications are in the cloud, you have to take security closer to the applications to address the latency and the performance from an application perspective. But the more important part is the bandwidth thing, which is brought about, and it's a double-edged sword, right? So the farther you have your security from your bandwidth, it's also going to increase that latency. So increasingly SASE depends on this whole architecture that's called as points of presence. So essentially, you have increasingly more and more SASE service providers like McAfee. They invest in a lot of centralized infrastructure within the regions called as points of presence. So you bring in the traffic over the internet to that particular point of presence, and then from there you tunnel the traffic because you've got your backend infra, you've got your backend agreements with service providers for seamless bandwidth availability and dedicated bandwidth availability and so on. So on a architecture and an infra investment for organizations within their premises, it is next to negligible. It is just a service. The cost of the infra, the cost of scaling up, the cost of availability, the cost of agility is all baked into the service. And it's a seamless, transparent service, right? So you don't have to plug in 4 different APIs if I have to look at the threat from a data that's coming in from the cloud or going to the cloud. I don't need a different API to look at the data aspect of it to see if there's data leakage. All of that happens in line. And therefore, that understanding of that SASE framework, that it's just a microservice-led architecture, it's a complete cloud service, and it connects just from your organization to the cloud, and whoever is your service provider sits in between and makes this whole security transaction for you from a threat and a data perspective. Once you understand that, you'll also understand the investment is more from a operational expense and not so much from an infra and so on. So it's a very straightforward way of understanding that. And the more important aspect is which applications of yours are in your premises. What is your vision for taking those applications to the cloud? Is that on an immediate basis? Because as long as your applications are still in your data center and you're making your employees, wherever they are, come back and connect to your data center, you'll always see those latency issues. That's going to be a bottleneck, and that's changing. So the IT aspect of moving those applications or shifting of workloads, as we call it, to the public cloud and to a sanctioned public application, etc. And then the security, which is going to be seamless with that. That's essentially how SASE works.
Sure. It definitely makes for a compelling business case. Anuj, would you like to add to what Vamsi says?
Yeah, so before I think we covered a lot about SASE. I think before we go to SASE, I'll just write this analogy with what's happening today and what happened in the cyber world. Just let's look at what is happening today. We don't know who's infected, who's carrying the infection. In the last 3 months, we saw 7 billion people coming to a grinding halt because of a virus which is unknown. We don't know the antidote, how it's going to be. Some get impacted and come out of it, and some have actually been very great. Now, vis-a-vis to that, let's look at a cybersecurity normal attack. It's the same. We don't know where the hacker is sitting. How is he going to impact you? Some organizations get hacked or get cyber breached, but are on their feet faster. Some really take a long time. Some places we've seen it's gone down to months as well, right? So it's a very situation where what is happening to a human on the virus front is what is happening to the end user on the IT front. And in all of this, if in COVID time it's the human, in the IT world, it's actually now the edge device, which has become the most powerful device. Today, in all our IT frameworks, edge was something which we would never call it as a king. Our data center was the king. Our, core ERP servers was the king, where we would put all or fortify everything to secure them. And we've come to a point where edge is now either the most vulnerable or it's doing the most computing for us, right? So at this point in time, the moment you have edge, which needs to be secured, we need to come up with frameworks, right? And as my wife always says in IT, we love to have these acronyms, right? And SASE is the new acronym that they're coming on. And yes, that framework is required. Now, again, to everyone's point of view, I agree completely that how we want to do it, what is the penal, to it, how is the organization wanting to go online, how much power they want to give to the user. There are very limited, things that you have to do or not to do. So in that, a SASE framework is a given. Now, again, how you implement it, what you do with it. And as I said, again, SASE is not a technology, it's a framework. So we will see a lot of evolution as we go in the next 3 to 4 months in this entire framework, which will make it much easier for the user to connect to the corporate environment in a secure way, in a seamless way, without the intervention of IT, and make him feel that working from home is equal to working from home. So that's my point.
Sure. I'll come to Debashish sir now. Sir, what benefits do you think can be achieved by redefining the network and security architecture here? Because you need to convince your top management what is the ROI on any new deployment. The first thing that comes to my mind is doing away with complexity, because today IT teams now spend an average of 29% of their time dealing with digital performance problems. Do you think this kind of a framework could actually cut down on some complexity in the infrastructure?
Absolutely, but more than complexity, what is going to really reduce is your risk landscape. What happens in a typical SASE or a zero trust in network architecture is kind of removing your applications from direct internet access to an in-between layer. Right? So anything which gets exposed, only that point gets exposed, which is, of course, your service provider layer. You don't really own it, service provider owns that. So that is essentially reducing your threat landscape. So that's a huge benefit. And I'm sure in the current scenario, this being possibly treated as one of the boardroom agenda item, this definitely moves really good in that context. If I can bring down my risk landscape, that means the investment definitely has a return of that point. That is one. A couple of other operational side of it. Probably you don't need to invest on SSL VPN anymore, because there is another layer which is taking care of it. Your DDoS attacks, that will of course get, because you don't have access of your application directly exposed to internet. So all internet related challenges, that automatically gets removed, right? So those are the definitely advantage, and thereby it reduces operational challenges, whatever you just spoke about. There is definitely a certain amount of benefit in that, but primarily it all depends on the change in architecture, which probably takes your kind of exposure from each application layer to a centralized service provider layer.
Sure.
That is the first thing it happens.
Sure.
Second,
Sure, sir.
Which is more from the kind of accessibility of user to each of the application today. If you look at a traditional world, access is given at a network layer. If I got access to the network, possibly I have got access to the entire environment, whatever comes inside that network. But in a typical SASE environment, what it does, it moves from the network layer access to an user identity-based access. So you are moving by each individual, you will have a different level of access. Yet little complex or little difficult in the initial time to implement, that is the setup part of it. But once you are kind of there, your the threat again comes to the threat side of it, definitely gives you a lot of leeway in terms of managing it in a day-to-day operation standpoint. So I do feel there is definitely a lot of benefit as this can be implemented and brings back to the kind of enterprise side.
Sure. Navneethan sir, reduces complexity, enhances security. Anything else?
Absolutely, Yash. In line with the revenues, what you have given. Apart from this operational stuff, there are many other, parameters which are a lot of fun. The main thing is, always from the CA standpoint, we look after there is a network component, and then on top of that, how we can, protect the specific network component as well as the data flow. That's what it is a fundamental things where we are expecting. The SASE framework really it helps a lot in terms of it to work on the network side, in terms of not only the performance, but on top of that, how we can add security also. It's a bigger, the advantage. Specifically, if you want to talk, just it can act as in a firewall. It can act as a maybe a DNS. It's maybe the threat preventions, whatever we want to protect from external to internal, and then maybe from internal to the external also in terms of the Tor, in terms of the dark web connectivity, and then other botnet connectivity also will be, the prevented. Similarly, it will work as from end to end as a gateway also. Like specifically, if you want to have any separate VPN gateway, it may not require. The SASE framework itself is provides is a single pocket, single data flow. It helps you to understand from the network side as well as from the the security standpoint. So that's why instead of having multiple component, multiple box, multiple solutions, this one solutions, which helps a lot in terms of the cost, in terms of in the performance, in terms of the effort from end to end.
Sure. Anuj, would you like to throw light on some more benefits accruing out of this new framework for the benefit of CIOs and CISOs?
I think again, I would echo with everyone's feelings, and we have the technology implementers, so they really know how to get this right. But yes, this framework is here to stay, and this, as I said, it evolve. It again depends on how and what you want to give access to whom. So it will define in terms of what you want to give access, how much access you want to give, and who you want to give. And identity will play a very key role in this. And as we move forward, I think the evolution of this framework will actually define the new normal that we are looking at workplace. And this normal will actually continue from now to times to come forward. And then we really realize that is this security framework far more secure than our traditional security frameworks? And I think as we evolve this, we will see that this framework will give us that kind of inflexibility, be a sense of security, and see there's a lot of technology. Unfortunately, in security, we have a plethora of technology. For every point solution or a point problem, there are 20 point solutions. And as even system integrators or as technologists, it is very difficult to keep implementing and deploying point solutions for every problem that you have. With this framework, I have a feeling that we'll eliminate of a lot of these point products. So it will reduce the complexity, get a little simplicity in this, and then again on top of that, incident management, incident response, which is going to be the key as we move forward. I think will become fairly simple. A lot of AI ML will get bundled in this, which will help you again further, help that the threshold of security to go a little higher. Elimination of human mistakes will start, getting out of the window.
Sure.
So it's going to be a very interesting time. And in strictly framework, I think in the next 6 months, this will really define the next roadmaps of security.
Sure. Vamsi, sir?
Yeah, sure. So, yes, I think I've spoken about it a little bit, but in terms of what it provides in terms of a value, I think it brings the best of security's evolution over the years to a framework that can be easily provided on a platform in a very seamlessly serviceable way. That's what it does, number one. The second thing is, like Debashish pointed out, this increasingly brings it towards a mitigation perspective at the board level. So that when I adopt a framework and that framework is scalable, it can be agile, can eventually bring in a lot more modular forms of security to Adish's point. It gives us a mechanism to continue to build on that framework and make ourselves adaptive and more secure as we go forward, right? So that's the benefit of this. And the true representation is, for example, I'll speak about McAfee here. All of the evolution from our technologies, right? We've had endpoint protection, we've had data protection, we've had web security, we've had network security and all of that. But this is the true coming together of all of those on a true platform model. Internally, we call that as the device to cloud security. So I look at the journey of a user from the moment they wake up and log into a particular device to when they shut it down and where the data flows and then comes back and it resides back in. I have to take care of threats, I have to take care of data, I have to take care of the application security, I have to take care of the infrastructure that's along the way, and ultimately even looking at security for the cloud. And it provides me a way to address that. And we're only at the beginning of this innovative cycle. I think we'll see an explosive innovation going on going forward. And I'm truly excited for what this holds for us as a future.
Sure. Gentlemen, we are fast running out of time. So one final question before we wrap up this session. I'll quickly go to each of the panelists to get their views on this last question. What are some best practices that come to your mind, when you talk about transitioning to the SASE model? Anil, sir, we'll start with you.
So, again, it will vary from which level of cloud adoption, hybrid, on-prem organizations. So, people who are hybrid or mostly on multi-cloud, for them, it kind of becomes more pertinent to have this framework. Best practice is driven through what is the maturity of different cloud providers and your core network provider. Now, who do you tie up with? Who gives you those things? So it's not. It has to be a matrix kind of framework that needs to be further derived in terms of best practices. That based on the organization journey. If it is pure on organization, it is much more simpler. You have your own network provider. They are a class A. They have to be a class A ISP. They have multiple point of presence across the company. It's much more simpler and easier to move into this. Hybrid, one cloud, on-prem becomes slightly more, but yeah, it's kind of manageable. You do it. Multi-cloud organization, you have a challenge. Where do you have tenancies, multi-tenancies, point of presence within the country, outside? How do you kind of converge traffic? How do you work with single network operators or people who work in multiple geographies? And then how not only just provide the network security to the provider layer, but also ensure that you are not kind of compromising your performance. Because end of the day, this business which is going to get transacted, nobody is bothered about security because it's kind of invisible. Invisible ID, invisible security. So it has to be best practice. The revision has to be based on type of organization,
right, sir,
and their own setup in terms of how complex or easy it is.
Sure, great, sir. Devashish, sir, quickly your thoughts on this.
Well, couple of points I'd like to say. When you decide on SASE framework, this has to be alignment with your priority, whether you are looking for protecting your internal applications, which is the enterprise application layer, or you are creating an environment to provide remote access to the users for this platform, for the enterprise applications. So depending on that, you have to decide whether you go for a layer 3 based SASE framework or a layer 7 based, because there are two different concept which is coming up as the technology is kind of evolving. So that is a primary decision factor, whether you decide on layer 3 or layer 7. And depending on that, you have to keep in mind, still you cannot address 100% of your application layer behind a SASE framework. There will be certain percentage of your application which needs to communicate with external environment due to what are the nature of application. So you need to keep in mind those applications also need to be managed in a possible traditional way. You cannot just assume that I have implemented a SASE framework and I am protected. So that is one of the area to keep in mind, right? So as we keep certain component outside, keep in mind that you have to have a DDoS protection for that, you need to have a WAF protection for that, and so on and so forth. So first thing, again repeating, bring your priority. What is that you want to achieve? You want to provide remote access, or you want to protect your application and bring down your threat landscape. Basis on that, choose the right technology and keep definitely exception rule for the component of the applications which is falling outside the framework.
Sure. Harshad, what best practice comes to your mind vis-a-vis SASE?
Yeah, so as mentioned, actually, it all depends on the use cases which you have. If you're
Okay.
looking for a bandwidth, if you're looking for a ease of use, if you're looking for agility, then definitely the SASE model is going to be very useful. And important thing is what I feel is basically most of the organization today are not cloud. They are not using cloud for many of their operations. Once they start using cloud, they will actually be able to use, or rather, I would say, they will be able to visualize the advantages of SASE model. So I think more adoption of course, the cloud agility very much is required, and I think identity, of course, is going to be more challenging. So yeah, that's important for us as well.
Sure.
So I
Sure,
think
sir.
you need to define use cases one by take.
Okay, great. Navneethan, sir?
Absolutely. In line with the thought what Devis is given, moreover, I can echo that actually. It's based on, what's your business priority, because SASE may not fit for, all the environment, right? Really where you have a cloud and then where you have a branch office. And then like how you want to protect in terms of the specific applications, or you want to enforce only the, the perimeter gateway, kind of stuff. So really we need a, very clear business case and then use cases which will fit for your requirement. And then based on the priority, you can take it up, because already you may have the entire infrastructure which is not required. Right? On top of that, where you need to build up this, entire SASE, the architecture. So that's why the priority, importance, as well as your own set of architectures will demand this SASE, framework to enforce and then take it forward effectively.
Sure. Anuj?
So, we being a system integrator or a partner who's going to be working with customers to deploy this framework, so it's extremely important for someone like us, A, to first understand the framework ourselves, right? And B, is really work with customers to understand what their priorities is, what is the roadmap, as Harshad pointed out, how much of it is going to go on cloud, how much it is going to be on prem. Today, it's the state of flux where everyone wants to just quickly deploy technologies, but what is the scalability? Where are you going to look at 3 years from now? A lot of questions that that we need to answer together, and I think it's a journey which we will have to embark together. And as a system integrator partner, it's our job to keep showing you the way, keep saying that this technology has these advantages, disadvantages, these are the price points, this is how it's going to look in the next 3 to 6 months, and keep working and evaluating various technologies in this framework. I think it's too early to even get to best practices because we're still in the phase of evaluation. So I think it's more about how we evaluate, how we deploy, and how we. That's what a system integrator partner should be doing with customers like you.
Sure. Vamsi, final thoughts from you before we bring this session to a close, please.
Yeah, in line with everything everyone said, visualize, understand what your current infrastructure is, your current investments are. Based on that visualization, prioritize what your needs are, and then the third important thing is optimize what you're seeing and make sure that you remain secure. The one additional thing that I'll add is, over the last few months, after speaking to a lot of customers and in advanced conversations around how SASE can eventually help them, the one thing that we realize is, security organizations, especially McAfee, can be the right cybersecurity advisor. And I'll say that because we've actually helped customers get that visualization into, can I safely adopt the cloud, right? Earlier things that they were close to, with this visibility, with this security controls that I can actually apply using this particular framework, can I safely move to the cloud? And I can say this with a lot of excitement that a few customers are actually looking at that sort of an approach to help understand, hey, I've kind of been a little slow when it comes to adopting cloud, but looks like if I understand this framework a lot better and if you help us along the way, I think our journey to the cloud can be accelerated a little better. So all in all, SASE is a journey. Let's start now and let's make sure that we get to the right stages, appropriately understanding our priorities at the right time.
Sure. Great. That's all we have time for, gentlemen. I hope the wonderful insights shared by the panelists today will help all our viewers to simplify the adoption of SASE architecture to support needs of edge computing, business transformation, and workforce mobility for organizations. I would again like to thank all our panelists for those wonderful insights. Thank you again, gentlemen. Have a wonderful day ahead.